could you just explain your story, how you started out, how it came to be that from the beginning that you got interested in music, made more music, studied music, and then got your first paid job. How was the story behind that?
It's a great question. Let me be as concise as I can be. Uh, I don't want to be too verbose. Um, so I started playing music when I was 5 with drums.
Okay.
Uh, and I loved it, but I don't think I was really obsessed until I started playing guitar at 11. And then when I was 11, from the time I was 11 pretty much to the end of high school, 17, I formed a few rock bands, one of which I played in from the time I was 13 to 17. Uh, so that was, yeah, that's like foundational to me is playing in a rock band. It's kind of my first experience with music, in a group setting, in a collaborative setting. And then, so my dad was a fairly well-known writer and performer. He would do these monologues on stage. Um, it's hard to explain the art form, but it's basically like a form of stand-up comedy in a way, but he's reading from his own journals. So his name was Spalding Gray, and Steven Soderbergh, um, the director, did a documentary about my dad in 2010 when I was in high school. And he at that time I was interested in film scoring because I think I was getting a lot of the rock music and pop music I was playing was wasn't exciting me the way it used to. And I started getting into composition. I started getting into the idea of composition, and I knew I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music. So Steven Soderbergh reached out to my mom, the director, doing this documentary about my dad, and asked if I wanted to contribute music to the film, the documentary. And he said, but no promises because Forrest is a novice, right? And I don't know what his abilities are, but if he wants to put together a piece, maybe we can include it in the film. So I did record a composition. I used my iMac, my MacBook, 2009 MacBook, and I used the microphone right here. And I went to the orchestra room after hours at my high school, and I recorded this kind of like minimalist, like it's like a minimalist but big wall of sound, kind of like a Phil Spector, but with orchestra.
Mm.
I used the timpanis and the snare and the glockenspiel, and I used fake strings on a Casio. And I made this piece, and Steven really liked it, Soderbergh, and he put it in the end credits of this documentary. And so I think that was just validation for me going into Berkeley. I'd already gotten into Berkeley at this time. I got my acceptance letter, and I knew I wanted to do film scoring. So I picked my major first year there, took all the prerequisites, uh, got into film scoring, and just like became an obsession. And then I went to USC out here in LA for their film scoring program, their master's program. I guess then it was a graduate certificate, but same difference. Anyway, uh, and that's kind of how I found myself here. I mean, I spent the first few years out of college ghostwriting, doing some ad work, the odd gig, and then I started working with my friend Chris Bowers, and then Carter, and then a few other people, and that's the rest is history.
Yeah, right. So that's a cool or also very lucky start, if you can say that the producer of this documentary came up to ask you like if you want to contribute music. So that means like he knew that you were already doing music, right?
Yeah, I may have alluded to this, but I was not trained, really.
Mhm.
I was self-taught on guitar. Um, I took drum lessons, but I stopped after I was like 7. So guitar was mostly self-taught.
Mhm.
So I couldn't read music. I didn't know anything about theory. And I started taking composition lessons when I was 17 with a composer out on Long Island in New York, where I grew up. So I was kind of getting the basics of some kind of compositional sensibility, but still, I mean, it's a cool piece. I'm proud of it because it could have only come about from a place of from a novice compositional voice. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's like it's simple, it's bombastic, it's lo-fi. Uh,
Yeah,
so it's a very unique. It's a very unique product for a very unique time where I was
yeah.
just interested in film scoring, but also still only knew rock music for the most part.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a challenge that you have to really go through and adapt to the new genre, if you can say. Yeah,
Yeah, and I listen. I mean, I just like I'm sure you. It sounds like you do. I just absorbed so much film music when I was 17 in my last year of high school.
yeah.
And I was just trying to emulate it, you know. And I remember I had that piece performed. I arranged it for 5 musicians for the end of my senior year as a part of a performance,
Mhm.
and it took me so long to write the notes on paper because I didn't read music. So I just like would write
Yeah.
a figure for violin, and I was just like, is that right? Is that an F? And then I'd have to reference uh, the notes on like a tutorial page. So so I'm really like I went to Berkeley and I kept my head down the whole time and I practiced constantly. And I the one thing I promised myself is that I'm going to learn how to read music, I'm going to learn composition, and I'm going to have the basics of music theory down pat. And Berkeley's great. It was a great education. It drilled it all into me.
Yeah. And in the future, are you going to pursue more your own compositions, or as of right now, it's good to be an additional composer and contribute in that way?
Um, all I have right now in the next few months are my own compositional work. I mean, that's great. On some level, it's great.
Yeah, I
But
love
at the
that for
same
you.
time, no, at the same time, I mean, that's my goal. I just want to be my own composer. Um, this past year, for so many of us out here in Hollywood, has upended a lot of our long-term plans. Um, whatever promise there was of being my own composer has kind of been stalled for the
Mm.
next year at least. Just because after the strike and COVID, a lot of Hollywood is just not in working order. A lot of projects were delayed. Very few people have work. So right now, I just if I'll write additional music for Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would take any gig that came my way for additional music. But at the same time, I have a few projects coming up that are my own that do pay, so I'm very happy. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's amazing. But are you 24/7 in music, or do you also have like another job that you go work in for some time and the rest you do music?
No, no other job,
Okay, full-time
just music. Yeah.
musician. Oh yeah, that's amazing. I love that you can establish that way and really live through making music. Like,
Oh yeah, it's really it's a real privilege. It took a lot of work to get here.
yeah. Uh, I'm what I'm wondering, from this perspective of financial advisor, because that's pretty much what I'm doing, is how are you managing your money? Because I think when you compose or make music, it's sometimes you have work, sometimes maybe you don't, sometimes it pays more, sometimes it pays less, and then you also have to look out for the future, what trouble might come, or just make sure that you're financially stable in the future when you retire, or all these things. So I was wondering, how do you go about that? How do you invest your money, maybe? Or so that's just interesting, not because this has much to do with music, but
No, I think it's helpful to know and to be honest about. Um,
so you don't have to speak about money here if you don't want to,
no,
or
no,
I
I'd
can
love
cut
to.
it out. It's all up
No,
to
I
you.
want to. I think it's helpful for composers to know. Um, I think the one lesson I've learned is that one, always get cue sheet. Like, do you understand the concept of cue sheet?
No, I haven't heard of it yet.
Okay, great. So when I'm referring to residuals, that's money I get that's generated on the back end, right? So the morning show season two will get 1 million plays, right? Say like every episode gets around 2 to 3 million.
Mm,
Each time those episodes are played, a fraction of a penny is generated for the music I wrote. And that does add up globally. I mean, it's played in Israel and Brazil and France, right?
yeah,
Um, the aggregate of that can be really lucrative. And that's
yeah,
passive income, right? You're just getting that every financial quarter. So what I've learned is that when you get a gig as an additional composer, see what they're willing to give you on the percentages, because mostly how this works is that when a composer hires you, they're going to take a percentage of the music you write, and they're going to get 100% of their own music, right? But there's some wiggle room on the percentages. So I did this gig 2 years ago, and it was for a friend, and it was on a network TV show for CBS, and he asked me, "Do you want to get paid 500 per minute of music, and I'll give you 40% of the residuals of the music you write, or do you want to get 400 a minute and I'll give you 50% of the residuals for the music you write?" And I was like, if this is a network TV show, I'm going to take 50% residuals. Thank God I did. You know what I mean? That 10% is a huge difference.
yeah.
That show garnered 6 million regular viewers
Wow.
for a network TV show. So I think there's that. Always go for cue sheet. Even if you take $100 per minute of music, meaning when I say per minute, music you write is approved, has gone through the revisions, and is mixed with the final film or episode. That's 1 minute of music for which you'll get paid a minute rate. Um, Even if it's 100 and they give you 80% of the cue sheet, always take the cue sheet. Always, always take the cue sheet. You never
Yeah,
know where it's going to play.
yeah. That's really reminds me of a lesson a mentor taught me or told me. It's like we don't want to earn, we want to own. Like we don't want
Mm-mm.
the 400 or 500 per minute and earn that money, and then we have to work again to get money again. We
It'll be
want
gone.
to own, yeah, we want to own shares of the the revenue that this movie makes or a show makes, and then we're going to earn all the time that the show makes money. That's because we own part of it. So
That's
always
exactly right.
always go for the owning, because maybe in also if you go into investing and think about stocks, you don't want to you don't want to work for the company and get your paycheck. You want to own part of the company, own a share, and
Yeah,
then you get
that's right.
dividends.
You want
So
options.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
the same principle. Yeah,
You're so right. The same thing applies. I think where the freelance element of it comes in, as you were mentioning earlier, is that you don't know what the next few months typically look like. You don't know what your year looks like. I don't even know what my year right now looks like. I have no idea. By come June, July, or August, I could be in a completely different work situation for the
yeah.
better. Keep your overhead low is a tip I got early on.
Oh
Meaning
yeah,
when 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 there's abundance, when you're getting paid well, do not go crazy. Maybe invest in your studio. That's always a great idea. Don't get a new car. I have the same car I've had since I moved here, uh, 11 years ago, and I'm not getting a new one anytime soon.
yeah,
Because what I learned is, and I'm learning this with a lot of older composers, and this is not to call them out. It's such a hard adjustment. It's been good money in film scoring for 30, 40, 50 years, and now suddenly it's just a dry spell. And if you have a mortgage and if you have two cars and if you have a separate studio rental, suddenly your overhead is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I think one lesson is be content that you have a studio like I have here. I have my own private studio in our house. Um, no car payments, cheap-ish healthcare, and no mortgage. I'm gonna
Yeah.
live like that for as long as I can. Because when the going's good, it's great, but when the money dries up in Hollywood, suddenly you realize how desperate your situation is.
Yeah. And
And
then
also form a retirement fund, an IRA. Can't recommend that enough as
what's
a freelancer.
an IRA?
It's you're basically creating your own retirement fund, whereas if you worked for a corporation, they'd be putting money away, right, in your pension.
Mhm.
It's money you choose the amount. It's at your discretion. You put a little bit of it away and it accrues, it accrues interest. So it is kind of acting like a retirement fund in that way. Um, that's the only way you can really plan for the future as a
Yeah.
freelance composer.
All right. So that's very, very insightful to really see. You have to watch your numbers. And also, what a friend of mine said was you have to know your numbers. Like, what do you spend
Mm.
each day or each month, at least? Like, what are your recurring expenses that you have each month? And what's the minimum that you can live on? What's the minimum amount of money that you can live on so that when all goes belly up, uh,
Hmm.
that you know, okay, I could take this job and then I'd be secured for this level would be secured and I'm good and I can
Hmm.
work with that and see what the future brings. But this is the minimum that I need. And if really everything goes wrong, then I could take a job that pays me this amount of money. And then I already know how easy is it to find this job. What do I have to do to get this job? What skills maybe do I need if it's not music? And then you can secure yourself and really have a backup plan that hopefully you never need.
I think that's a really smart idea. I could do more of that. I've been lucky. I kind of just could fly by the seat of my pants, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Where I
most
just keep
definitely.
writing, keep trying to get work, and my philosophy is frugality. Like I don't know if I've ever even cut,
Okay.
but I would recommend. No, it's smart. I would recommend that every freelance composer um, oils their expenses down to a pretty fixed number
Yeah,
and see how they can live within that totally. Even if you um, exceed it, you at least know what the threshold is that you've exceeded
yeah.
financially.
You said you're searching for work um, because you go with the flow. That's what, or kind of what you said, and you're always searching for a job that you can do. So how does searching for a new job look like? The way where you get hired and then you make music for them. Do you, or is it a lot through networking? Is it people coming up to you or texting you on Instagram or your email? And how does it look like?
It's all of the above. I think yeah, you got it just about right. I think networking is kind of a dirty word in that I think and this is not to chastise you. Sorry. I
No,
had to learn this too. This is a new philosophy, but um you should just make friends with people. You should be active in your community.
yeah,
And you should say yes to things. And I've been doing, I have good friends from USC who are only now just starting to break in on their own after being writers' assistants or working in writers' rooms or working at production companies. Um, so there's that for sure. The people you know will come to you one day and they'll have a budget and you can collaborate with them, which is great because you always want to work with friends.
yeah,
And that's one part of it, right? And then the second part is maybe you have an agent, maybe you don't, but if you do have an agent, which I do, they they send you out on demos, right? Netflix is they have a show in post-production and they're looking for a composer and you're one of 10 or 15 that all
Mm.
have their demos sent out and they sort through them. So that's one. That's hard. That's like winning the lottery.
Mm.
And then the third is being very persistent with people you don't know personally, but whose work you admire and you feel that you actually are at a level that you could be in consideration. So like a documentarian for a documentary you saw at a film festival and you heard that they had no original score. It's a great reach out to that person and keep them in the loop. That's the only like networking muscle I think you should have, networking, which is just that these are people you don't know, you admire their work, you're on their radar, just keep them updated. New music, new updates.
Yeah,
Um, it's always well received for filmmakers because they do want to meet new creatives.
definitely. I kind of had the idea, or also got recommended that I should make my own jingle for the podcast here.
Oh yeah, totally.
Definitely, yeah. And I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, it's a great challenge.
yeah, most definitely. And now I'm thinking, like, how can I do this best? Because it's definitely orchestral. I want something orchestral,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure how I can do it in a, like, it's maximum of 15 seconds. I mean,
Right.
anything longer would be too much. So like from 5 to 15 seconds, that I can put in the start of every podcast episode. So I'd love to have you put your mind a little to it. What do you think? How could I make this jingle for the podcast?
Well, if I were you, I would look at the great film studio logos, which
Mm,
are 15 to 30 seconds, right?
mm,
Sometimes I guess longer. Um, they're all the great ones are all perfect expressions of motivic ideas, right? Like we were talking about.
mm.
They have an arc and they have a finale. I would steep yourself in those short form studio orchestral logos. Universal, DreamWorks, um,
20th Century Fox.
Columbia. What's that? 20th
20th
Century Fox is
Century
another
Fox.
great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great example. I mean, obviously, it's anachronistic that sound now. You'll do something more contemporary, I'm sure, but yeah, you should look at those.
Yeah.
You see how they complete an idea from start to finish in 20 seconds.
Yeah. That's, I think, most challenging.
Yeah, that's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
again,
I have
a
to do it.
cell,
It's
use a cell. And when I sell that, I just mean like a motif. So something that's not too elaborate melodically,
yeah, if it gets too
right?
complex,
Yeah.
it's too much for a few seconds. Yeah.
I mean,
But
I think the DreamWorks one is terrific.
mm,
Bum dum da da dum da da din da da din da 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 da. I mean, it is kind of like a Bach line. It's actually I'm contradicting myself because that's pretty elaborate, but the answer to it is so perfect. Ba-ba-bum, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Do you know the DreamWorks logo?
yeah,
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, you start on the classical guitar, that beautiful those brass chords come in. Um, I think that's a good example of like how to say something in 20 seconds.
yeah, definitely take that word of advice. Does it sometimes also happen that you know someone or have a project, you see a project that you really like, and they don't have original music, as you said, that you make music for them in advance
Mm.
and like send it to them. Hey, I made this for your show. It would fit there and there. Um, what do you think about? Would you like to work together or something like that? Does that happen? Do you do that?
Look, you can. It's a long shot.
Mm.
But what it will at least prove to someone, I think, or I hope, is that you're a long shot, you're an unlikely pick for the composer, but you've shown them that you'll do the work. That's the only advantage you have sometimes. It's really, really hard to get a show, a studio show, or on a big streaming platform, just cold, without any connections,
Yeah.
without any without any work history with one of the producers, the showrunner or director, or not even director, showrunner.
What's the difference?
Well, on TV directors, the showrunner kind of is more a directorial role. They're overseeing the process.
They, the showrunner is the one that ends up putting the video footage and overseeing
Oh,
the budget and everything, or is it
n-
because you said the showrunner's in a like directorial position, so how does it differentiate him from the director? The director
I
is
mean that I mean
making.
that less in terms of uh, duties as much as I do where the power, the decision making, creative decision making power lies.
Mm, okay,
The
so the
showrunner is kind of
showrunner.
overseeing the writing of it. Many times they've brought it's their show. They brought the concept to life. They're very much involved in the shooting of it.
Mm,
Whereas I think you'll notice on TV, like you'll have dozens of directors sometimes for a sitcom on every episode.
okay.
Um, they're coming in at the end, and sometimes they have the actors in the show, like they'll get directorial opportunities. You'll see that in a lot of shows. But anyway, when you're in the running for a show, you're usually on the showrunner's radar. Um,
Mm,
and like I said, going in cold, like here's my music. I hope you like it. It's it's honestly a crapshoot. It's
okay.
almost impossible to get a gig like that.
All right. I'm excited to hear what the other um, musicians that I'm going to interview in the future
Mm,
think
they
of
might have a
that,
different
how
take.
they approach getting new gigs. So very interesting perspective.
But one thing you can do, Levi, and I hope this is helpful, is what you offered is a great way to cut through the crowd, which is, hey, my agent told me about this, or so and so told me about this. I really love the idea. I went out of my way to write a suite of music that's inspired by the idea. Here it is. They may not even take you at the end of the day, but they will remember you. And I think that's important.
yeah,
It's a good attitude. It's good to have that attitude. Not like my music stands for itself. You either like it or you don't, because there's so many composers.
yeah. It's
So
just
many composers.
I realized that when I really got into looking up people that whose music I like
Mhm.
and asking them for an interview and really getting more into the scene of music and then also getting recommended new music obviously from you and others, and how many composers, how many music makers there are. I It was never so present that there are so many people doing this. And then again, it's tough to see what makes the difference. Are you going to be the one that's going to make it in this industry, or are you someone who's trying but it doesn't work out?
Well, I guess it's your definition of what's working out. You know what I mean? I think if you make money as a composer full
Yeah,
time
yeah.
and you always have work, you've succeeded. You know, you may never get an Emmy nomination or you'll never be an industry name necessarily, but if you're always working, it's a huge success. It's a huge success. Well, because I
It's,
see I see from your perspective, I totally get it. I mean, I haven't lost any of that hunger. Like what keeps me motivated is getting my music out to as many people as possible, right? I want to say big things from big places. Always. I don't want to settle for something that feels like I'm you know, undercutting my potential. And that's my own personal incentive. But at the same time, I think the model of the Hans Zimmer or the Danny Elfman, like that just might not exist like it used to.
Right? Yeah, I really admire Hans Zimmer, but now I also think like Daniel Pemberton is amazing. Like the work he's done with really Spider-Man Across the
Mm,
Spider-Verse is something that really inspired me to pursue this way
yeah,
or
he's
this
great.
path. But yeah, to have this standing in in the industry, and it's like it's an incredible feat to really get
It's
there.
it's unlike anything else. It's a
Yeah,
once in a generation achievement to be that much of a household name as a film composer.
yeah. But the cool thing is the the future household names and the future leaders are right now in the making. So we're starting out now, or maybe we're a little further, but it's what's happening in the future. Someday there won't be a Hans Zimmer anymore. He'll still be a legend, but after Elon Musk dies, like there will be a next Elon Musk, not going to be named Elon Musk, probably, but the person taking the spot or taking the attention in this way, they're just starting out now, like the newer generations. That's really what's coming next. So I think it's a great opportunity. We're young and we can work our way up into more attention if that's your goal, but and into incredible contributions to works in the future or movies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, is would you say for you attention is an end, an ends, or is a means? You know what I mean? So
ooh,
what do you admire about Hans Zimmer? Because I also really admire his work.
yeah, I don't really admire him. Wait, that sounds so wrong. I What I admire about him is how he makes music and how it contributes to the movies. That like in Interstellar is incredible. Like
Mm.
you probably watched Interstellar, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen it twice in theaters.
Yeah, it's incredible to or Inception.
Mm.
The, these things are so amazing. And first of all, the capability to have the idea in your head and then to bring it to life. That is what I admire about it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm curious about, and this is more of an open question, um, is you have your Elon Musks because industry is perennial, right? Innovation is time immemorial. You have tycoons, right?
Yeah,
So what I mean to say is that whoever takes on space exploration and EV manufacturing and as outsize a cultural role as someone like Elon Musk is always going to be a household name because of the perch from which they operate, right?
yeah.
And what I'm curious about film music is if we have passed the age of the Mount Rushmore of film composers, where even your aunt in Indiana knows Hans Zimmer. She knows nothing else about film scoring, but she knows Hans Zimmer. I wonder if that will always be the case. I have this feeling that new media and the rate of communication and digital content is creating a space where everything is so short-lived and so ephemeral that actually there is no Hans Zimmer successor. That will be an old model of
I
fame for film
understand.
composers. There will
Yeah,
always be an Elon Musk, to your point, because if you're at the vanguard of AI and space exploration, and self-driving cars, like you will be a household name. You are a consequential person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I'm noticing more and more is that there's so many composers, which is great. My point is not to lament the loss of these great luminary household name composers, but rather to know that that actually isn't a high achievement anymore. No, doesn't need to be. I think
Well,
I think Daniel Pemberton's a perfect example of someone who's like, I don't know if I think about Daniel Pemberton all the time, but every time I hear a score of his, I'm blown away. And I'm like, wow, he's always working. It's just that always working, always making interesting music.
yeah.
Those are the composers that I feel are more accessible to me now. Whereas Hans Zimmer is like, you have to be it has to be the right place, the right time, the right person. It's like it's such an unlikely occurrence. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just putting it out
No,
there.
yeah, I think it's actually because things are so short-lived right now, which is a very valid concern, like
Mm,
most definitely. I think that life in general is going to change a lot. And I kind of saw a few days ago, I saw people in on Instagram um, who commented on a video about iPad kids,
mm,
like how Generation Alpha is totally messed up with no restrictions and no ability to focus. The people were commenting, all right, boys, we are next. And we have to do better for Generation Beta and all the next generations. That it's actually my hope would be that more being more focused or not so fast paced, that this
mm.
is going to come back into the in the future, but in a different way, obviously, because social media is here to stay. Short form content is also here to stay. It's definitely the biggest type of content that's being shared worldwide, but maybe that it's changing in the future and that something like this is possible again. But also, like, AI in music creation is also a thing. There are really good songs that can be made with AI.
Yes,
And then the question is, okay, when do I actually need a composer for my music? Or can I just tell an AI what to do? And maybe there will be an AI that analyzes a video sequence that you give it, and
definitely.
then it sees like, okay, this scene is emotional, is scary, is the scene is very intimate or whatever, and then it
Mm.
composes music to for this scene. So I'm not sure where this is all going.
Yeah, and that's coming like tomorrow.
Yeah,
That's a pretty easy task for some of these nascent AI music makers.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I worry about that. I do. What I'm why I'm sanguine, which is to say, like, holding on to a bright spot in the future, is that I think you can really stand out as a unique voice if you're confident in what your voice is. I think you can stand out with craft for sure,
Mm,
but also relationships, because at the end of the
yeah,
day, there is going to be an interpersonal there's always an interpersonal element between a composer and a director. And even if that means you're an AI consultant, music director who guides the tool toward more interesting music, you're still kind of needed,
yeah,
as bleak a thought as that is, and that is bleak.
yeah. So that's that's a hope for the future. But yeah,
Yeah, or you look, again, we're dealing with these behemoths here. You can't change the culture when so many people are opting into it. By that, I mean, when AI comes for music, and it will, and it has, in some
Yeah.
sense. Um, you can't stand up, you can't stand up on your ivory tower and say, stop, don't do that. It's degrading the quality because the consumer can't help themselves. They will just go in, outright and absorb as much of it as they want.
Yeah. But I think also in that sense, it really comes down to what the showrunner wants to create. Like, what's the goal of the showrunner? Does he want to make profit? And then,
Hmm.
of course, you can substitute musicians or whatever, make it cheap, but the consumer will take it. That's fine. And then he has a lot of profit. Fine. But what what I've seen with Arcane, which budget was 250 million
Mm.
for 2 seasons, each with I don't know, 10, 8 to 12 episodes. Not that many. I think
Yeah,
eight
yeah.
episodes. It's
That's expensive. That's an expensive show.
incredible. But it's not about the profit in in the case of Arcane. It's not about the profit. They have created something that is a masterpiece in so many ways. Like from music, obviously, the art style that they used for the show, the expressions really of personal issues, of yeah, conflicts within a character in their mind.
Mm.
It's incredible how they expressed it, and it is something working on something much bigger than the every person. It's not just you that's important. It is everyone, the voice actors, the drawers, the animators, the director,
Mm.
the musicians, the mixers and masters, and the ones that put the audio and the video together. Everything, they're working
Right.
on
You can feel the
something
level of care and artistry
bigger.
at every level.
Yes.
Hmm.
And if that's your goal, then you don't care that AI is going to be less expensive. And then you can just substitute it that way. No, like they really paid a lot. So much the show wouldn't even make that much money.
I think that's fair. I think that's a really good observation. It's one of the few things I've held on to remain optimistic. At the same time, I have to acknowledge, and I have to acknowledge out of, my own security going forward, that when the AI tools become so cost effective and you have a $250 million budget, you just won't have a choice as a creative, as a showrunner. Like the choice is going to be made for you sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, here's a good example is like The Brutalist, if you saw The Brutalist.
Is it, where is it on?
It's in theaters. It's an Oscar contender for Best Picture, Best Score.
Okay. I haven't heard of it yet.
It was made for $10 million dollars,
Whoa, that sounds cheap.
and it looks incredible. Now, that's a good example, I think, of a too big a budget um, can kind of curse you, I think, and working
Yeah.
within a budgetary constraint like that. But yeah, I mean, look, I think I want to be hopeful, but at the same time, when you have so much short form content, what a film or series has to offer you has to be, it's going to have to stand out as a work on its own and not cave to the demands of an audience that digests or ingests a lot of short form media. You know what I mean? Like, you can see the difference in a movie that is made for a movie's sake and a movie that is made for content's sake. Does that
Mm,
make sense?
yeah.
Yeah. One leaves you one leaves you with this kind of like lasting, substantial feeling. And then the other was just kind of a roller coaster. which are
Yeah,
fun. Roller coaster is great.
yeah, that's so true. What I really want to go through next is a piece that you created or score that you made. Go through how you made it, what you had in mind when you made it.
I
So,
actually have something for you that that I own the rights to. I just can't show you the video.
all right, but that's good enough. So
Mhm.
let's go into that.
Great.